So at this time, I would like for us to all welcome two of our moderators here, Ms. Madeline Sue Everhart. As most of you know, she's the past chairwoman of the state Grand Old Party, and we are very blessed and honored to have you here. And we also have Mr. J.K. Murphy, and he writes all those wonderful stories from the Marietta Daily Journal, so we appreciate you being here, and we appreciate you moderating. We also have our three candidates. We have Mr. Scott Johnson in the back, Representative Ed Setzler, and we also have David Delk with us this evening. So we'll be coming up in a minute. The first order of business I would like to do is I would like us all to stand and honor our country with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now, if you'll remain standing for just a moment, I would like to also open us in prayer. So if you would bow your heads, let's all pray together in unison. Heavenly Father, thank you for the opportunity to live in the greatest country in the world. Lord, we just come before you now with three candidates running for an office to represent constituents in a mighty way for the state of Georgia. And we ask you, Lord, to be with each and every one of them throughout this race, to run an honorable race in honesty and truth. We ask you, Lord, no matter who wins, that at the end of the day, we're all friends and we all work together and get behind whoever wins in the primary. God, you are God and we are not, and only you know the divine future that we have to live under in this county, in this state, and in this country. And we just ask now that you bless everyone in this room, everyone who's joining us live, and you just be with us in fighting the good fight to preserve the American way of life. In Jesus' holy name, amen. Amen. All right, so I'm going to step down the step and hopefully not break my neck and read the rules. I'm being corrected. So we have sponsors who have the opportunity to speak. So if you are a sponsor this evening, would you please come forward and get what you paid for? So first we have David Delk, who is a sponsor. And David, if you want to come on up on stage so that you'll be in the view of the camera. Then we also have, who else is a sponsor? I don't have a list. Anna Tillman. Anna Tillman is a phenomenal woman who does not have a primary opponent. And she, yay, we're got a primary opponent. And she's running for House District 43. And the representative, who's going to speak for Jake Evans? Mr. Long is going to speak for Mr. Edwards. No? Oh, Hunter Hill, I'm sorry. Hang on one second, and we'll hear from them, but first we have David Bell.
All right, so Sally and all of the GOP leaders appreciate putting this together. It's an opportunity to be a part of a wonderful process and a system to get to talk about what we believe in. And so just a little bit about myself, though. I grew up in Gwinnett County. We were in Snellville, Georgia, before Snellville was cool. It was South Gwinnett High School and a Tasty Freeze after the ball game, and those were your options to go eat back then. So after living in Snellville, just to be a little bit transparent about my life and where I've come from, Mom and Dad went through a divorce at age 13. I've got a younger brother who's 2 years younger than me. And so everything that we had experienced up until that point in time, which was great community, playing ball, playing baseball, basketball, and football, enjoying going to church, had a great community that we lived in, was turned upside down when Dad called us in one day and told us that they were going through a divorce, which meant that Dad also had another surprise, that he was telling us that he had done some illegal things and he was going to have to serve some time for the things that he had done. And so everything was perfect, and then overnight everything was imperfect, and everything was tidy. House, the community, mom, who took care of us, and dad went to work every day, was turned upside down, and we lost everything that we had. And so we moved across town, and mom went back to work, and so we became latchkey kids overnight. And all that to say is through the years, I have learned to overcome a lot of obstacles in life. I've learned to be a fighter. I've also learned that family is everything. So when you get married, it's for better, for worse, and you work through the difficult times, because families are something I'm running on. Families are the bedrock of our society. It creates healthy communities. It creates a place where people can learn to have life together. And when you're going through ups and downs, then you have other families that you can count on. And so through the years, I made some really good choices in the beginning and a lot of bad choices later in life. But through all of my bad choices, I met my bride, who we've been married for 37 years. And one day, if you want to go grab some coffee, I'll tell you where we met and how we met. But I was a bouncer at a bar. We'll leave all the details later on for another conversation. But I did, meet a wonderful woman. We moved to Powder Springs, our first home, and then 2 years later we moved to Hadaway Road, and that's where we've been ever since. So my career path has been 10 years in the engineering field, and then later on in life I went to work for the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. It's one of the most rewarding jobs I've ever done, but again, a very rewarding job. But my salary when we first started was $25,000 a year trying to raise a family of 4. So we learned how to live on a little bit and be good stewards of what we had and count on God to make ends meet. And so after 25 years of working for the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, we are where we are right now. I never saw myself running for political office. It was not an ambition that I had many years ago. In fact, it seemed like any person that ever got in a race got thoroughly beat up and their life turned upside down. And I said, well, why would I want to do that? And I tell you why I'll do that. Because I love my country. I love the country that my family lives in. And I want my family to have a better country than what we have right now. Right now, we have a lot of obstacles. We have a lot of trouble in this country. And we need to be a part of the solution to fix it. And if that means I get beat up a little bit, I'm a big boy. I can take it. And so I would rather, as Edmund Burke says, the only thing needed for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. I'm not going to sit on the sideline and do nothing. So that's a little bit about David Hill.
Thank you so much, David. I sure appreciate that. So now please welcome Anna Tillman. And she will tell you a little bit about herself and why she's doing what she's doing. And she's a very smart lady who I'm privileged to call a friend. So enjoy Anna's message. Thank you, Sarah. Make sure I don't screw up coming up here. It would be really bad for her. Okay, hi, I'm Anna Tillman. I'm running for House District 43 in East Cobb. And when I was in kindergarten, just kidding. Sorry about that, David. A little bit far back. I'm starting with the current. So I am a Georgia native, and I've been living in the Atlanta area for 31 years. And I'm a geologist by education and trade. And I have a master's degree in geology from the University of South Carolina. Still a huge Dogs fan, though. And I have a professional geologist license in the state of Georgia. And the most recent issue was by Brad Raffensperger. So thank you very much, Brad. I recently retired, but I worked for 35 years as a geologist in the environmental consulting and oil and gas industries. And I worked for, I did a lot of projects where they were multi-million-dollar projects in environmental consulting. And I worked and traveled abroad for many years. So worked with a lot of different people from many different backgrounds and cultures. And I fully believe in diversity of thought. So the overarching theme of my campaign is to protect our constitutional right to freedom over tyranny, As we all know, the socialists have infiltrated our country, our state, and even Cobb County has fallen in line with the socialist agenda. If you can believe that, that is really shocking. Sally's heard this story, but my commissioner held a webinar between this, with the Citizens Climate Lobby, and the primary objective of the Citizens Climate Lobby is to enact and promote a national carbon tax. So our Cobb County commissioners are supporting a national carbon tax, which would be an absolute disaster for our economy, and just absolutely shocking. I am a conservative patriot. I believe in the Constitution. I will absolutely, and I will act on the conservative principles of lower taxes, personal freedoms, less regulations, and smaller government. I know that sounds like an oxymoron, right? Smaller government. Because that's a tough one, because we don't have any small governments. So we really need to look at, cutting back on wasteful spending, doing other things to actually try and get it a little bit smaller. One thing I wanted to talk about, switch gears a little bit, not talk about myself, except in this case of canvassing. So I wanted to point out the benefits of canvassing. All right, so if we are really interested in a grassroots initiative, we want a grassroots turnout in our elections, we have to canvass. We all should canvass some, because it's pretty enlightening. I learned quite a few things over the last few weeks. I've canvassed 100 homes in the East Cobb area, and one of the main comments I received is that they hadn't seen anybody in years, ever. Most said they didn't know who their representative was. And, again, that's partly, their responsibility too, because I know who mine is, and nobody's ever canvassed my house, and I know who my representative is. So they do need to take a little bit of responsibility in figuring that information. So, but I just thought that was pretty telling that my representative has been in office for 20 years, and I'm sure she probably has not canvassed or met with the constituents. The constituents don't know her, and she doesn't know them. I want to be a citizen's representative, and I want to stand for the people, because the people are tired of not being represented. The people are tired of electing candidates to go somewhere, go to Congress, go to wherever, and they don't vote and they don't act the way that they said they would as a candidate. So that's a big thing for me. So I'm going to read a couple of quotes. So this was really, so as canvassing, I will say that we have a very interesting district, because out of 100 homes, and I've canvassed before, and I've never gotten these kind of comments, very interesting group. So I went to this guy's house and knocked on his door. He comes to the door and he says, "Did you pick up my beer on the way up my driveway?" And I said, "No, but I would have if I had seen it." And this was just for me. So this guy asked me, "Are you a communist? If not, I will vote for you." And I assured him that I was not a communist, and he said he would vote for me. And this last one really takes the cake, absolutely takes the cake. Talked to the guy for a while on his porch, and so I was walking off, and he called out to me and he said, "So, how many times do you want me to vote for you?" I said, "That's up to you. As many absentee ballots that you receive." Okay, well, that's all I have. Anna Tillman, I'm running for House District 43. I appreciate your support and your vote. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Cam, just to let you know, I have a red light.
Yep, switch.
Okay. Well, now it's kind of purple. Does that matter? We might need to make a run for some AA batteries. Okay, and now we've got Hunter Hill. And Hunter, I apologize. It's looking at a distance. It's hard for me to tell who people are. So please accept my apologies. If you'll grab that mic right there on the end of the table so that you can share with us about Jake, and I'll go grab and blow up some batteries.
There we go. Perfect.
I thought, and I heard Pam's voice. There we go.
Hi, everybody. How you doing? My name is Hunter Hill. I know everyone in here has probably heard from Jake in the past, and so I'm just going to tell a quick story about myself. When I was a boy, or actually when my dad was a boy, when he was my age, he was selling guitars at a guitar center, and he had this manager that he wasn't a big fan of. You know, I know a lot of us can have a manager that we aren't a big fan of it, and so he had this manager, and this guy ended up walking out one day. He just up and left the guitar center, and my dad said, "Well, hey, there's a vacancy. Maybe I could be the manager. Maybe I could do that job." And so he went to the store owner. He said, "Hey, boss, do you think maybe I could be the manager? Do you think I could fill in for him?" Boss wouldn't give him an answer. A couple weeks later, he asked again, "Hey, boss, you think that maybe I could fill in this role? Maybe I could be the manager. Maybe I could do this." He didn't give him an answer again. I think a month had gone by, and my dad had gone to the boss again and said, "Hey, boss, do you think I could be manager?" And he looks at my dad and says, "Kevin, when are you going to stop asking me, and when are you going to just do the job?" And that's exactly the guy Jake Evans is. He's a constitutional warrior, a constitutional battleship. And when I was a boy, I learned pretty quickly that in this country, we got some stuff we got to get fixing. I looked behind the veil. I didn't know what deficits were. I didn't know what budgets were. And when I looked behind the veil, I saw almost $30 trillion of debt. People who say that they're going to do things and get elected and don't do them. And at the end of the day, kicking the can down the road, going along, getting along. I'm tired of seeing it. Republicans that are always on the back foot. Republicans are always playing defense. Jake Evans is a fighter. He's a fighter. He has made sure to define his constitutional career as a constitutional warrior, as a man that fights for religious liberties, a man that fights for election integrity, and through, this guy's a lifelong patriot. So I'm his political director. We are hitting the ground 100 miles an hour. We're working very, very hard to take our country back, get young Americans involved, get people to the GOP meetings, get people to panels like this. And so if you'd like to volunteer, if you'd like to get involved, put signs out, knock on doors, make phone calls, you would be after the program. We'd love to have you. I mean, this people ask me, what is America First? I think we talked a little bit about it, Nazi, and America First is putting people first. It is, we have got to start putting a cap on all the spending, putting a cap on all the rhetoric, putting a cap on all the infighting. We've got to start doing the job. Because my dad, he ended up getting that manager spot because he walked in that next day and just started doing the job. Jake's going to go to DC. He's going to start doing the job, and we'd love to have you along for the ride. So my name is Hunter Hill. The name you need to know is Jake Evans. Vote for him. May 24th is election day. Early voting will begin on May 2nd. And please come out, vote early, and especially vote on election day. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hunter. We appreciate you being here. Hunter's a great young man. I really have enjoyed getting to know him. So I'm going to step over here to the podium while Cam changes some batteries. And I am going to, I guess, move back up here. You can tell how scripted we are. Kevin, if you could just flip that off, that'd be great, unless there's an AC technician in the house. We seem to have okay, Bob, you're on duty tomorrow, not today. So I'm going to read the rules. The rules of engagement. Candidates will draw numbers 1 to 3 to determine the rotation order. And all the candidates have been sent the rules, by the way. We're not just bringing it on them tonight. Each candidate will have a 2-minute opening and a 1-minute closing statement. A 1-minute, 30-second, and 10-second warning will be given for opening, and a 30-second and 10-second warning for closing. Time limit will be 1 minute per answer unless otherwise stated by the moderator. 30-second and 10-second warning will be given. Questions will be summarized by moderators, individuals, and organizations. 4 questions will be from each moderator. Again, our moderators are Ms. Sue Everhart and Mr. J.K. Murphy. 5 questions will be pre-selected from the audience. So you may have filled out an index card. Debbie has those at this time, and they will be selected. 3 questions will be from the GOP chairwoman. That would be me. Moderator may ask follow-up questions for clarity. There will be a 30-second response time. All questions should be based on current issues. Rebuttals are not allowed. Candidates shall not address each other directly. No heckling from the audience, and that would be y'all. No heckling. We did confiscate some Rotten Tomatoes at the door, just to be sure. A straw poll will be taken after the forum. Again, if you would like to participate in the straw poll, there's still time. You can purchase a form that's at the front desk. Lily has those. Good luck to all 3 candidates. If you would like to come on up, we'll get started. You can tell their names are here. We also have on the screen their information. We have Mr. David Delk to the left, Mr. Scott Johnson in the middle, and Representative Ed Sutzler to the right. And we made sure y'all didn't have to share microphones.
You have 1 minute for questions.
Just wanted to check.
Oh, there you go.
I said you wouldn't have to share, and then I didn't give you the microphone, so I apologize for that. Okay, JK, it's your show.
So we're starting with opening statements. And the order that we will go in tonight, we're going to go, actually, the audience is left to right. So, Mr. Dell, you can begin a 2-minute opening statement.
Great. Well, as I shared earlier, political office was never anything that I aspired for, but I do love the country we live in. I do love the opportunity to be able to serve in office if you feel called to do that. But the 2020 election was something that motivated me to be where I'm sitting at today. Watching the things that we saw in the 2020 election, I have never seen in my life, where states quit counting votes, suspended vote counting for a period of time, and then picked it up in the middle of the night when nobody was watching, or some people were watching, but some people left their precincts and went home. And so I think it was a travesty that took place. And I think that has created an awakening in America where people who wouldn't normally be involved are involved. And so when you have, where is the light or the timing, Sally? Right there, I'm sorry, thank you. So is that 1 minute? Thank you, I'm done.
Good job. All right, Mr. Johnson, you're up. 2-minute opening statement.
Thank you. Thank you. And I want to thank the Cobb GOP. I want to thank Chairwoman Sally Grubbs for providing this opportunity for us all tonight. This is a great thing. And I, you know what? Why am I running? Because I've never had any lack of motivation to try to make a difference in my community. If you like sitting where you are, we opened this, Sue Everhart and I opened the cut the ribbon on this thing, and this place right here in 2010, 12 years ago. Some of you were here, you were here, and some of you were here because we thought that Cobb County Republican Party, the leading Republican party in the state, ought to be the place that sets the example, and we did. And I had been involved in campaigns for years. Eventually chaired the Cobb County Republican Party, the 11th district of the Republican Party, and have been involved in campaigns more than you or I could count for the last 30 years. the opportunity to run for state senate came up, and I thought, this is the next way. I've been on the State Board of Education for 10 years. Education is a huge priority for me. Our schools, our students, but I thought, this is the next way for Scott Johnson to make a difference in our community. It's my opportunity, it's your opportunity, and I just want you to know, I would be honored to serve in the state senate with you.
Mr. Setzler, 2-minute opening statement.
Thank you. I think if we think deeply about the issues facing us, we realize we're in a battle for the soul of our nation. We are under unrelenting attack. The values that our nation is built on are not just under attack in our schools, they're under attack in our public square, they're under attack in the business community. Our employers, in many cases, are turning against regular citizens. To fight the fight and to win the fight to preserve American values and preserve the principles on which our nation was founded, we need a proven conservative leader that can win. Every person in this room could step up and serve in the legislature. You could step up and you could raise your hand, you could go serve honorably, you could do your best. To win in this environment for our values, where we're under an unrelenting attack, we need a proven conservative leader. A proven. I've commanded American troops. I'm a Ranger qualified company commander. I served for 9 years on active duty. Was a rifle platoon leader and commanded the 18th Airborne Corps, served in the Persian Gulf, Africa, and Europe before moving to Cobb County to raise my family in 2001. I've been a business leader for 21 years in the architecture and engineering business. Led programs across 40 states and 4 continents. And my whole time in the legislature, I've been working a 50-hour-a-week job, leading people in the business environment while I serve. We need citizens who are engaged in the day-to-day struggles of everyday people to serve us in the state capitol. There's too many retirees in the state capitol who are down there and kind of on cruise control. We need folks who have the skill sets, who are proven and have the intensity to win for our values in the state capitol. I'm a conservative. I fought for the sake of human life, for the Second Amendment. I fought for election integrity. Starting in 2017, my House Committee on Science and Technology led our state in analyzing some of the systems that are out there, the bogus issues we see, the problems we see with election technology. We were delving into those things 3 years before the 2020 election. Thankfully, at least, we've got paper ballots to vote on, and I want to stand before you guys and serve you as a proven conservative leader. That's what we're talking about.
Well, thank you, gentlemen, for the opening statements. We're going to move into the questions and get into some issues. The order for this question will be Mr. Johnson will answer first, and then Mr. Setzler, and then Mr. Dunn. Gambling is a perennial issue that comes up in the Georgia legislature. Constitutional amendment to legalize sports betting was introduced last session, but failed to pass. Allowing casinos to operate in the state has also been discussed in past sessions. My question is, should Georgia gambling law be expanded? If your answer is no, why not? And if your answer is yes, what gambling should be included and how should the revenue generated be spent? Mr. Johnson.
Yes, sir. And so I have to admit, I wasn't in favor of a lottery when it was adopted by the legislature back in the early 90s. But it has provided the whole scholarship, and we've all learned to live with it. But casino gambling is not a practical nor a productive way for government to provide funds for our state nor leadership. It sends the wrong message to our children, to our families, and I am not in favor of casino gambling. We all know sports betting goes on, and I'm not saying that it should be legalized. I don't think so. But casino gambling, I think, is bad for Georgia. When I go to places that, well, have been to Las Vegas probably, where you see, I don't like what I see when I go there.
Thank you. Yeah, as a reminder, the questions, we have 1-minute responses, and we're going to move on. Representative Setzler, do you need me to repeat any of the question?
Casino gambling is fake economic activity. It's not the salvation of our state. It doesn't produce the wealth and the prosperity that manufacturing and services do. It's fake. It's going to turbocharge sex trafficking. You think about going to Las Vegas, where boys and women can be bought for money for sex trade being illegal there. You bring that clientele to Georgia, they're going to expect the same filth here. Secondly, it's going to undermine our families. The message it sends to our young people that we need somehow things that are addictions that are wrong for economic salvation is fake. And lastly, it's going to corrupt our politics. You want to understand the Jack Ingramoff lobbying scandal? One lobbying interest fighting another lobbying interest. They will line the pockets of elected officials in Georgia for generations, corrupt our politics, and we need to do everything we can to expose the lie that is casino gambling and stop it from coming to Georgia. I mean, we're probably lead on that. We probably lead other members and stop it this year, but they're going to come back. We need to win every single year to stop this from happening.
And Mr. Dell, should Georgia gambling law be expanded?
And the answer for me is a big fat no. I think it does our citizens a disservice. I think it creates bad practice. I think it creates bad health. I think it creates problems for the family. My wife and I have been to Las Vegas before. When you walk through a casino, all you smell is smoke. All you see is people that have been there at the table or lottery machines for hours and hours and hours, and oxygen tanks. So there's a lot of there's more creative ways to spend your time and your money and your resources than to create an environment for the citizens of Cobb County other than gambling.
Thank you. The order of responses for this question will be Mr. Johnson, Representative Setzler, and Mr. Dell. Candidates for statewide office, including some for governor and lieutenant governor, are promising that if elected, they will champion the abolishment of Georgia's state income tax. Understanding that the tax now brings in more than half of all revenue for schools, colleges, public health, prisons, and mental health programs, is this an initiative you could support?
So the easy answer is, none of us like taxes, and we'd all like to see the income tax done away with, right? But we also know that when over half, just slightly over half our income for the state comes from the state income tax, and we have to have roads, we have to fund education, we have to have prisons, and we have to fund our public safety. Those things are functions of government that we all need and we all want and we all need to fund. So when we say, and I like the idea of reducing the state income tax, which is a plan that the legislature has put us on now with Governor Kemp's approval. The idea of eliminating an income tax, if we could come up with a practical way of doing it, I'd be fine with that. But what I do know is when you go to Tennessee, when you go to Florida, other states that don't have an income tax, their property tax is very, very high, and their sales tax is multiples of what Georgia's state tax is. So none of us like taxes, but all of us need to fund. We all need to fund together.
Thank you. Spending is taxation. In a state like Georgia, we have a constitutional duty to balance our budget. Anything we spend requires taxation. We need to control spending. We're the second lowest spending state in the nation per capita. We need to continue that. We go back and forth with Texas. We need to focus on spending first. Secondly, honored to have been part of the largest tax cut in state history. Since 2018, we've cut the income tax from 6% down to 5.5%. We've got it on a course to drop to 5.4, 5.3 all the way down to 5% between now and 2029, while creating a flat tax rate. It takes fighting to do that. I'm honored to have been a part of that. People have been listening, and people recognize that we've got to fund the government at a steady walk in the same direction over time gets us where we need to be. So again, balancing cutting spending and a steady decrease in the income tax rate can get us where we want to be.
And Mr. Dell.
Well, I think it's the responsibility of any legislature, person serving, its citizens to, take as least amount as you can and give back, as much as you can to the people who are, providing the service. So I think, it sounds good, state income tax or abolishing the state income tax sounds good. If government can show what it will do to your other taxes, what your other tax brackets would be. And so if you can effectively do that and show that the citizens will be better off, then I'm all for that. But just to throw a blanket statement out there and say we need to abolish this and you'll be better off, I think is a difficult task. But if you can provide information that shows that you'll be better off without it, then let's do it.
All right, thank you. For the next question, the order is Setzler, Delk, and Johnson. This past year, Cognia, the private for-profit company that accredits many of our schools in Georgia, including the Cobb County School District, conducted an unscheduled review of Cobb County schools. They issued those findings and then later retracted them based on improprieties during their investigation. In the wake of this botched Cognia review, current District 37 Senator Lindsey Tippins brought forth a proposal this past legislative session to reform the way accrediting firms evaluate school districts. The bill passed the Senate but failed to receive a vote in the House before the session ended. Is this an issue you would take up if elected? And why or why not?
We are in a battle for the soul of our nation, as we talked about. We should not have any private, unaccountable entity having control over our governments. We shouldn't have control over our schools. And the idea that you've got an unaccountable elite who get to, upon invitation, come and swoop into school boards and decide whether school boards are doing their job, and duly elected board members and the folks they've been the professional they've hired to educate children is an outrage to me. I mean, in my legislative career, we've taken on the college board. We talk about the control of ideas through what they drive in curriculum. There are a number of unaccountable entities across our country that we need to stand up to. I'm honored to have done that. I'm honored that my Senator Lindsey Tippins has done that. And we need to complete the drill. We need to not be accountable to any private entity that's not accountable to the public. No, injecting elected politics into this, folks, a lot of folks will tell you, well, politicians will make this worse. But I can say there's nothing better than folks that are accountable to you making these kinds of decisions.
Mr. Dell.
Well, like Ed, I think it's a shame that we have private corporations that are evaluating whether or not something is effective for our students or not, or effective for our families. So I think if you look at our schools in Cobb County, we have an effective school system. We have, both of my girls went to a public school in West Cobb, and I think both of them turned out just fine. And as long as we have parental involvement, I think we should allow this practice to take place where we grade our schools, but not by an entity that has an agenda, a hidden agenda. And yes, I will push that bill forward.
As someone who's dealt with Cognia pretty up close, being on the State Board of Education, I can tell you, we shouldn't have any unelected private entities determining what the direction of our schools. And it's not even based on the academic performance of our schools. It's based on other things like the governance that is largely based on the opinion of a woke organization like Cognia. And we don't need it in Georgia. We're going to fix it in Georgia. When I'm in the Senate, and I will lead that. Being an education person, having a lot of experience on the State Board of Education, I'll lead that fight, and I look forward to us getting it right and doing better by our students and our schools.
Okay, the order for this question will be Mr. Dell, Mr. Johnson, and Mr. Setzler. Senator Tippins had a background prior to the Senate on the Cobb School Board and quickly became effective as the chair of the Education Committee. Based on your background, what committee assignments would you pursue, and where do you see yourself being the most effective and why? Mr. Dell.
Well, based on my background in ministry, I have a proven track record of growing something that did not exist in Cobb County almost 30 years ago. And that's the presence of a ministry that helps influence our coaches, helps influence our student athletes in a very positive direction. And I think first and foremost, it is good to pass good legislation, but what I have learned about human beings over time is the greatest transformation you'll ever see is one that takes place in the heart first, and then they will become better law-abiding citizens in the future. As far as assignments and committees, I'm going to be a student of my first year. Somebody asked me earlier, what would be my first act? Well, foster care reform, so I think something in relationship to families and children will be my first committee that I would look forward to serving.
Johnson?
Yes, I'm going to lean on my background of almost a decade serving students and families in our state board of education. I understand the education. I understand the importance of fully funding education. I understand the importance of having opportunity scholarships for special needs students like my grandson, who I've got grandchildren in the Cobb public schools, and I've got Mount Perrin Christian School, and students ought to be able to go and get the help they need where they need it. But I would say that education would be, Senator Tippins said when he signed off in the Senate, keep education a priority, and I want to keep education a priority for Cobb County and for Georgia.
And Mr. Stetson?
I've had the honor every year I've served the legislature to be on the education committee. In fact, I've served the Education Innovation Subcommittee on House Education for 7 years. What you learn in that is you learn the importance of preserving our public school system, keeping standards high, and empowering teachers and parents to be the decision makers. Teachers and parents want what's best for kids, and teachers and parents are empowered to be successful. Secondly, I believe in school choice. The legislature depended on me in 2014 when we had the constitutional amendment on the ballot to do conference calls when the charter amendment was on the ballot. I had a conference call with 14,000 people on the call, asking questions, having these kind of debates, and focusing on issues to make sure Georgians were rock solid on school choice. I've been depended on to do that. I'm a proven conservative leader in education. And lastly, this session was depended on by House Republicans to go to the level of the House to fight critical race theory and make the arguments in front of 11 million Georgians. These ideas of critical race theory are antithetical to what America stands for, and they're not going to be tolerated in Georgia. I've been depended on by conservatives to lead on these issues. I'd like to lead on those in the Senate.
Okay, we're going to hand the mic to Sue Everhart, who will ask the next set of questions for her question 1. The order is Scott Johnson, Ed Setzler, and David Dell.
Ms. New, I'm going to take Chairwoman's privilege just real quick before you ask your questions, because it relates to a topic that y'all were just asked, if that's all right with everyone. Hopefully it's all right with everyone, because I'm going to do it anyway. Forgiveness, not permission, right? On the topic of Cognia, because Cognia does accreditation for, I believe it's 35 of our 50 states, there have been some that have suggested that we need to have our own state board of accreditation for those purposes. Instead of going to an outside organization and doing the accreditation, I would just like to quick down the line know from you guys if you would support developing a state board of accreditation for our schools rather than using an outside organization.
Yes.
I think we ought to get it right when we do it. And if it is a state board of accreditation, then they want to do that. But if the private sector can step up and do it well, then, and provide, the problem right now is Cobb has no competition. They're really, I mean, except for a small, almost insignificant, competitor, they have no competition. If the market can fix it, let the market fix it. If not, then certainly a state board of accreditation is a valid choice.
I think having a system that's accountable to voters is very important. Having said that, everything we do needs to be mindful of the future. What happens if we had a governor like a Stacey Abrams who was making appointments to key positions? Would we want to have an accredited entity where all the people on the accredited entity were appointed by a Stacey Abrams? So when we do it, we've got to structure it in a way that's fireproof, that makes sure we can uphold these timeless values we value so much, by making it accountable to the public, but putting firewalls in place that it can't be a political takeover if one party takes over control of the governorship. So it's got to be accountable, but it's got to be designed in a very careful way to make sure the prerogatives of our diverse and conservative state can be preserved.
Thank you. My first question is, and it's kind of a two-part question. What is the number one issue facing Georgia for the next 2 years, and what do you suggest we do to make it happen? And we start with Mr. Johnson.
I believe the number one issue facing Georgia is inflation and the security of our economy. I'll say it. Who in this room thought 15 months ago that the Biden administration could wreck our economy, could sell us maybe I didn't even believe it. Okay, some people say you believe it, but who would have thought in 15 months this administration could wreck a great economy, send us to up above $4 a gallon gas, and 8% inflation, and food prices through the roof. Those kitchen table issues are the things that threaten our lives, and they threaten our livelihoods. And we need to keep a strong economy in Georgia, and the best thing that we can do is not let Stacey Abrams become governor. That's the most important thing that we can do, and keep our legislature red.
The most important thing for us to do in the next 2 years, I believe, is to put in structural protections to preserve liberty in times of future emergencies. I mean, thankfully, we have Brian Kemp in place as our governor. Our governorship we have one of the 10 most powerful governorships in the nation. If Stacey Abrams or someone else had been governor, she would have had the powers that Gavin Newsom had to shut things down. We need to put some structural things in place that in future emergencies, executive authority can't be wielded in ways that undermine liberty. Secondly, we need to work as a state across our party with our Washington delegation, with our state legislature, and our governor, to make Washington as inconsequential in our lives as we possibly can. Yes, sir. Solutions come from Atlanta, imperfect though they are sometimes. So we can solve things in Atlanta. We don't need Washington to have more. We need to deconstruct the power of Washington so we can be accountable for ourselves.
Next question will be
Hang on, I'm down here still. I haven't passed out yet.
You gotta speak up quick.
Well, I think what made our country great was the Constitution. And I see people already in the news trying to redefine the Constitution and telling us it's old, it's outdated, it was written by, racist white people. I'm tired of that kind of rhetoric. That's poison in our country. And I think our Constitution is a document that has kept us great. It's a document that has kept our freedom of speech, our right to own guns in place when bad actors are in power. And so I think we need to do all we can to protect the Constitution, because that's the bedrock of society. It's the bedrock of the greatness of this country. So whatever laws need to be in place to protect the Constitution is what we need to do.
Mr. Sexton.
I believe this question will go to you first. What amendments to the Georgia election law would you consider in your position as senator to push for to assure that we have fair elections?
I was honored to have been part of crafting Senate Bill 202, the bill that was strong enough for election integrity that the woke Major League Baseball took the All-Star game from Atlanta and sent it to Denver. When we were working on that bill, I asked for 27 things to be done. In looking at the 2020 election, I think we got a lot of outrage and things we saw. So I asked for 27 very detailed things to be done in that bill. Of those things, I got 21 of those. They be 27, I got 21. The other 6 include eliminating no excuse absentee voting. When you look across the globe, most nations that care about election integrity do not have no excuse absentee voting. SB 202, we couldn't do it as part of the bill for lots of reasons, but we need to not give up on that fight. Okay? Secondly, we need to have continued. I was able to win on getting watermark paper for our ballots. I believe we need to have serial number lots of 100 to 500 lots, for the ballot, so that we can't have multiple ballots even produced with that watermark paper. So we have accountability of ballots. A lot was done in SB 202. I'm very, very proud for that fight. And who have won that fight, a very, very important fight. But there's work to be done, and I think number one is no excuse absentee voting.
Am I next?
Yeah, I think Scott Johnson's next.
I'm proud that when the Heritage Foundation ranked what states had the strongest voting laws after we passed Senate Bill 202 that the legislature did, they said Georgia had the strongest election laws in the state and in the nation. And you know what? As Georgians, we ought to be proud of that. And yeah, I'm not great concern about the 2020 election, but looking ahead, our legislature, our governor have done some monumental things to ensure that the vote that you cast in the future and that I cast is secure. We vote, it's easy to vote and hard to cheat. That's what we ought to do. And I agree on the no excuse absentee balloting. That ought to be the next thing that Georgia changes the law for and strikes, because it makes no sense for no excuse absentee balloting.
Mr. Dell?
Yes, I think this whole thing of election transparency was a lesson, baptism by fire in 2020. And whatever accommodations we made for people in 2020 because of COVID to make it easier to vote created a nightmare for all of us. And so I think whatever concessions we made, we ought to have the ability to make it where you have to show up to vote. There should be signature verification. You should have an ID, and if you don't have any of that, then you don't vote. So I believe the things that we learned from 2020 should help us make better decisions in the next election. And so I'm all for making sure that the person that shows up to vote is the right person and name on the ballot, and it's that we are not cheating the system, because that's another thing that makes our country great. It's fair and honest elections.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to go with you again, Mr. Dell. What is your position on the newly passed bill for parental rights, and do you think it went far enough?
I'm sorry, you'll have to inform me more on that bill.
Well, do you want me to go start with Mr.
Yeah, I'll start with
Sutcliffe?
somebody else.
I'll start with Mr. Sutcliffe since he's very familiar with it.
Sue, with all due respect, which bill are we talking about?
The parental rights bill.
Parents' Bill of Rights.
Yeah.
Oh, the Parents' Bill of Rights, yeah. Governor Kemp led on the issue of Parents' Bill of Rights. It really tried to put in law things that parents should guarantee for their schools. I don't want to be critical. I think the governor was bold and taking a step out there on that. I think it's a framework we can start with. I think even the governor would agree there's more work that needs to be done. I think one thing we need to focus on though is recognizing parents should have some fundamental rights with respect to schools. One thing I was honored to have worked on that we passed as well was the Untitled bill, to give parents a guarantee to be able to have access and be able to protest the things that are being shown to kids in school. And if it's approved and if their request for removing material is rejected by the principal, it's billed to the school board. If the school board rejects the request to remove the material, it's exposed online for 12 months so everybody can see it. There's nothing like transparency to make public school officials think about, wait a minute, if everyone's going to see this content and we really want to show it to kids, that's a powerful incentive by shining a light on anything parents are denied to take out. Proud of that, and it's part of the effort we'll be moving.
Scott, would you like to?
Sure, thank you. So, parents ought to have the right to know what their children are being taught in school. Do you agree with that? Absolutely. You know, and look, you can't know every word that's going to be said in a classroom, but you can know the curriculum that's going to be used. You can know the subjects are going to be taught, and it ought to be as transparent as anything else in government to parents. COVID brought a lot of things to light, didn't it? And some parents looked and saw what they were learning, what was being taught to their children, and they were appalled. Now, look, we've got great school system here in Cobb and Marietta, and schools around this county. They're not all perfect, but I'll tell you, for a state law, there are many places in this state that you'd be appalled, and they're not far away from here. You'd be appalled at what is being taught your children. You ought to know. You have every right as a parent.
Mr. Dell?
Thank you for allowing me to regroup there. Parental Bill of Rights. I think parents are the number one authority in a child's life. It is not the school board. It is not the teacher or the principal. As parents, our children are our children. No one has the right to impose indoctrination or views that do not line up with what we believe children ought to be teaching. So thank you for that hand clap. So with that being said, we need to make sure that we're actively engaged in our communities. We're actively engaged in the life of our children. Anything that happened in the life of my child that I did not agree with, the teacher and the principal had a friendly conversation with me the next day to let them know what our values were. And I think it's a crime that the Attorney General is taking parents that show up at school boards, showing concern for what their children are learning and labeling them as extremists. So we should never have to worry about that in this country, ever.
Since we got out of order, I'm going to start with the order that I put in before. The first one, and which is now going to be the first one, again, will be Mr. Sutton. What skill sets do you think you bring to the table to be the next senator of District 37?
If there's anything I aspire to in leadership, it's humility. I strive for that every day. I think it's the mother of all virtues. So as you take any leadership position, we start with humility of what we don't know, and the humility of wanting to listen to regular folks. I ran for office the first time as a dad from a neighborhood that didn't have any political connections. I came from no political royalty, but I was a regular guy from a regular neighborhood that wanted to go down make a difference. Thing one is I'm never going to forget that where I came from. That's thing one. But with that, and through that, and through our experience as a leadership, I'm looking to take proven conservative leadership. I've been tested. I've been attacked by the radical left. And Planned Parenthood, the left, spent $500,000 last election to utterly destroy me. I mean, my 13-year-old daughter had applications with attack ads in her phone while she was doing homework at school to attack her dad because we stood for life and led in the heartbeat bill. I was responsible for heartbeat bill in the legislature. I believe that we need leaders who've been through that fire. We need leaders that have debated Stacey Abrams face-to-face in committee, beat her in debate, taken the issues to Georgians and from 11 million people in the White House and won the debates, that have got in the details of bills and worked out issues like assisted suicide, like the safety of life, like religious liberty. having led on the roofer bill in 2016, language that would have made a change. The details of proven conservative leaders will be.
Mr. Johnson, do you want me to repeat the question?
No, I've got it. Thank you. So, the ability to get people to work together for a common cause and make things happen. Now, I go back to when Governor Deal appointed me to the State Board of Education nearly 10 years ago. A business person, and someone who's I've never held office. This is my first run, but when I asked him, Governor, I'm not an educator. I don't have a background in education. Why did you choose me? I waited till he swore me in before I asked for this. But he said, Scott, it's because I trust you. I trust your judgment, and you know how to get people to work together for a common goal to accomplish things. And that is what you'll get in a Senator Scott Johnson. That is what you'll get. Someone who knows how to work with people, how to get things done, and how to be effective. It's why my colleagues on the State Board of Education elected me as their chairman, and it is what I will continue to do in the state Senate.
Mr. Bell, do I need to repeat the question?
No, ma'am.
Thank you.
I'll try to behave myself. So, let me say this. My skill set is being a Christ follower. That's who I follow every day of my life. That's who I love. That's who I worship. And I believe being a Christ follower means that you learn the skill of servant leadership. It means that you put people first. You act unselfishly, and that's what I promise to do. And my skill set has also led me to raise a great family, to love people. One of the first things that God told us to do is to love one another as I have loved you. And so when you have that as your motivation, you do things well, and you put people first, and you don't lie to them. You tell them what you can do and what you can't do. And I think because of that, I have a set of core values that I will take to the Capitol: honesty, integrity, working as a team with the right people, and serving people well. And so that's my skill set. It may not be the best as a politician skill set, but I believe it's something that is a recipe for success in helping our community become good and strong and better than the rest.
All right, thank you. So we're going to move on to the audience question portion of the evening. These 4 questions were given to me from those that were turned in by the audience and approved by Chairwoman Grubbs. We are going to go Mr. Johnson, Mr. Bell, and Mr. Setzler this time. Do you believe the state legislature should have called for a special session to review the allegations of election fraud before the presidential election was certified?
I believe that if it could have changed the outcome, then I believe it should have been done. But I'm telling you that the outcome could not have been changed by after the votes had been counted and cast. And if there had been a special session called and created a constitutional crisis, I think it would have been bad for our state. I don't think that, I think our governor could have done a much better job in communicating what, on a daily basis, what was going on. But I do not think that a special session could have changed the outcome of the 2020 election. It's that simple.
Mr. Bell?
Well, what we saw is something that we've never seen before. So it might be rather difficult to say in hindsight what we should have done. But I know that shortly after making a decision to run for office, I was given a 20-page document on a committee hearing that took place at the Capitol. And the things that I read in that report were mind-boggling. The things that took place in our election and people that were fired that came forward and testified. So with all that being said, everything that was done and everything that was brought to light, I don't understand why we couldn't do more than what we did. Now, I'm not a lawyer and I'm not a legal minded person, but I know that anybody that saw what was done and read the report, I think more could have been done. I'm just not sure what could have been done.
Mr. Sexler? Thank you. The 2020 election was an outrage. I called for an investigation. There were committee hearings in the House and the Senate, and it brought a lot of things to light. Mr. Delp talked about that. There were a lot was brought to light in the process. But the plenary power people talk about the legislatures have to adjudicate special elections was wielded by the legislature. The legislature more than 20 years ago took that plenary power they had and appointed to the courts of our state to adjudicate all disputed elections. Okay? 49 states have done that. 49 of 50 states, the legislatures have taken that plenary power and given it to the courts. One state has not. North Carolina, after Bush v. Gore, gave themselves the power to adjudicate disputed elections. So only the state of North Carolina legislature has the power and law to do that. In fact, 2 U.S. Code 5 federal law says the law that's in place on election day is the law that has to be used moving forward to adjudicate these elections. In the courts, there are between 3,400 and 3,500 provable abnormal votes. Provable votes that using courtroom caliber evidence to vote for the election. There was not 11,708. There was a whole lot of hullabaloo that was the basis of SB 202. Things we fixed, we couldn't prove in 2020 with courtroom caliber evidence, but we fixed those in SB 202. It couldn't have changed the 2020 election, but it's going to massively impact the 2022 election. That's how we need to move forward.
Thank you. Mr. Sessler, you'll be up first on this next one. What is your position on biological males in women's sports? And will you pledge to support legislation to prohibit it?
Let me start by saying this isn't a funny issue. I don't envy people who were tormented with these kinds of issues themselves personally. And we need to have a tender heart towards that. But that tender heart towards their individual trouble does not need to lead to males competing against females. In fact, this year in the legislature, we passed a law empowering the Georgia High School Association to prohibit biological males from competing against biological females in high school sports. We indemnified them so they can't be sued for that. We gave them all the legal protections they needed, which they wanted, for the Georgia High School Association to prohibit that. But we don't need to stop there. We need to put the same thing in place in college sports. We need to lead the nation so that the male hitter, the Augusta University team that dominates in girls volleyball can not continue to do that. Nothing against them personally, but males and females biologically are fundamentally different. We cannot undermine the revolutions, wonderful revolutions we've had in the last 50 years of women getting involved in sports. Women involved in sports is 9 times today what it was in 1970. That's a revolution we need to continue. We need to lean into that. We need to treasure that. I was in my daughter's tennis match today. It's a critical part of our culture that would be undermined by allowing biological males to participate. We've taken a step. We've eliminated that in high school sports. We need to continue and eliminate it in college sports.
Yes, sir. Mr. Johnson.
Did I just say hell no? I think of my 10-year-old granddaughter and who started golf lessons and her coach said, you know what? There is so much opportunity for young girls to get scholarships, and each and every year they go unfulfilled because there are not enough young ladies that are interested in golf in college. And then I think of how outrageous it would be for a young man to take that opportunity away from her. Do you agree? Yeah. So we shouldn't. It's amazing that we're even having this conversation, and yet we are seeing at the college level and the high school level men be able to compete in girls' sports. It is outrageous. It shouldn't happen. And in Georgia, we ought to take every measure to be sure it never happens in Georgia.
So, you need to have a sympathetic heart to those who are conflicted in their thinking of what gender they are. But we also have to ask, when did this begin and how did it begin? We never thought 20, 30 years ago we would be having this kind of conversation today. In fact, I don't even think we thought 5 years ago we would be having this kind of conversation. So somewhere along the way in our educational system, some high-minded professors started indoctrinating this idea of gender identification in our schools. And we see it taking place in our schools right now, where people are taking it upon themselves to introduce it to kindergartners and first and grade level people. So we need to protect this travesty that's taking place, protect our families from it. So I'm not exactly sure what the question was, but I do think it's appalling that we would allow sports take place for boys who think they're girls and compete at the same level that a girl who is a biological girl would be, born that way, and then their physical bodies have different things that they compete with, and a boy has a superior advantage over it. So changing them to your title to a woman doesn't make it right.
The next question, how do you plan to take a pro-life stance beyond protection in the womb? And we'll go with Mr. Delk.
Okay, repeat that question one more time, please.
How do you plan to take a pro-life stance beyond protection in the womb?
Well, I've been taking a pro-life stance for many years, and again, it's the transformation of the heart that makes a person pro-life. I've just recently heard in our conversations before we started this debate, and I've also watched the news, we got some states that are thinking about killing a child after the child is coming to the world, in bringing legislation where if a child is 30 days old or 60 days old and you don't like the way that child turned out, you have the power to put that life to death. That is demonic. That is the most cruel and evil that I have ever heard of. So I will be a warrior and champion the cause of pro-life after the womb with responsible legislation that makes it impossible for anybody to consider that kind of demonic activity.
Mr. Sexton.
Honored to have written in 2020 and finally passed this year the Maternity Supportive Housing Act. The Maternity Supportive Housing Act deregulates kindness. It's something that you would think you wouldn't even need to have as a bill. But before we passed the bill this year, it was illegal for churches and nonprofits to have a home that 18, 19, and 20-year-old women could live in, because it was still regulated as being a youth home. It required massive capital reserves, it required 24-hour supervision. With the Maternity Supportive Housing Act, we laid the groundwork for a post-Roe America, so that the nonprofits and churches, with no more regulation than a regular single-family home, can have up to 6 young women with their children, if they have other children with them, to live in a home in a way that's no more regulated than a single-family being under one roof. So you think about in Cobb County, there's this issue of having multiple families under one roof. You can have 3 or 4 women in a home, perhaps maybe a retired missionary couple is the home parents or whatever, that can live there for free from 18 months after they deliver their child as a transition period for at-risk women to be able to keep their children, to give them a housing plan that transitions, that's a critical transition for them to make a life decision. Right now, we've been empowering pimps and johns and boyfriends to scare women into abortion, all the pain that comes with that. The Maternity Supportive Housing Act puts a powerful incentive and ability for churches and nonprofits to care for these women in a powerful life.
Well, let me set the stage, and I think that absolutely we ought to protect every life within the womb until that live birth occurs, and we should consider nothing else except for the life of the mother. Now, post that, after that, let me say, government ought to make every effort to work together with the private sector, with nonprofits, and partner to allow places like Calvary, work with places like Calvary Children's Home, which is in the 37th district, by the way, which is in West Cobb, where many of us live, and Rain Tree Village, which is down in Valdosta, which is my daughter-in-law's grandparents founded that. You know, to work to find solutions. I've had I was appointed by Governor Perdue back in way back there to be a part of the Department of Human Services Board, which oversaw the foster care program in Georgia, and to make it easier and better for adoptions and foster care. We ought to make it easy for children to live and to find places where they can thrive, in private homes, in group homes if necessary, but make it possible for children to live their lives, and the government ought to be a part of that, not against it.
All right, thank you. So this is our fourth and final question from the audience. Mr. Johnson will go first. Would you support year-round legislature, part-time session versus full-time for 3 months to allow more citizens the ability to serve?
So let me make sure I understand. Can you read that again, just to make sure? Is it year-round legislature?
Would you support year-round legislature? Part-time session versus full-time.
Okay, so it would make our legislators, I assume this would be the question, would we want a full-time legislature, as many states have, and then that serve year-round? I think we got it about right. We ought to meet 40 days a year, whether we need, maybe every other year. We ought to skip a year, and some states do that. But you know what? I think having a citizen legislature is the right tone for a state like Georgia. In fact, it allows people to go to the Capitol, serve, and go back to their private duties. In my case, go back to my business and take care of business, rather than we don't need folks that go to the Capitol every day of the year, draw a full-time salary, and become professional politicians. We don't need it. We don't need that in Georgia. And let's be sure that we always have a citizen legislature, so that you people like you and I can serve and go back to our communities and serve there.
Like in Texas, there's a part-time legislature that goes for 12 months versus, say, for 3 months, where it's pretty much a full-time responsibility. As a result, lots of people citizens are not able to serve for 3 months out of the year. Unlike, say, a Cobb County Commission, where if you have a job, you can serve for an elected office. So would you support a 12-month part-time legislature versus a 3-month full-time legislature that allows more citizens the opportunity to serve who are working full-time?
Thank you.
The answer is, I think Georgia, a 40-day, 3 months roughly, it does a good job. Our legislature serves us. I don't think that we should change it to suit what some other states may work.
Mr. Setzler.
The states that have full-time legislatures include California, Pennsylvania, New York, and Massachusetts. There are 5 states. There's one other. I don't want to get the other one wrong, but that tells us something. A year-round legislature. I appreciate the question. In theory, it seems to make sense. I think the effect would be, because it's so competitive and there's so much intensity what's going on, it would swallow the entire year. If there wasn't a 3-month boundary on it, essentially, and it was, even if it was part-time for the entire year, the effect it would have is it would be a full-time year-round legislature because the pressures, the deadlines, the need to compete against other folks. If I'm a business person that's working 50 hours a week, but the person working against me is sort of the landed gentry that doesn't have to work. They're working full-time against my bill when I'm off on a business trip. The dynamic would create a full-time year-round legislature because of the competitiveness, the intensity, and we'd be moving in the direction of California, Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, and New York, and that's not the direction.
So I think anything those 3 states are doing, we're going to do the exact opposite. So, you know, if you're looking at a full-time, part-time situation, it handicaps a lot of people like myself the ability to be able to run for office. I think you'll run a lot of good people off who would not be able to live up to the demands of that year-round, part-time service. And I think we need to encourage all that we can new people getting into the process of running for office. We need new talent. I know there's proven talent up here, but we also need new talent because we've got a lot of people who have served for a really long time that don't need to be there anymore.
Amen.
Yeah, I think when you look at the national level, the top 3 people in government have 150 years of experience, and we have the same screwed up problems that we had 50 years ago. We need to remove those people from office. So we need to allow new talent to always come to the top.
All right, that brings us to our closing statements.
I have questions. I have lots of questions.
Okay, well, this was actually planned. I didn't hop in line. Debbie did write it down here. Questions 10 through 12, Chairwoman Grubb. So just so you'll believe me, it is written here. So I have my questions, and then there were some more audience questions that came in. So I'm going to ask my questions, and if we have time, we'll proceed with that. You were the last one to answer. Who goes next? Y'all be the boss. Okay. My first question is, if elected, will you support the Cobb GOP, come to events, and work in a collaborative fashion?
Yeah.
I'll let you go, Scott.
Well, since I've done that for the last 25 years or so, I think you can certainly expect Scott Johnson to continue to come to Cobb GOP events. Did it long before I was chairman. Did it when we opened this headquarters and cut the ribbon. And when I was chairman in 2010, we opened this headquarters that you're sitting in right now. And I'll be here for events for the Cobb GOP, whether they're at the Jim Miller Park or in the Rollins Free Baptist Church or right here in the 79 Rumpel Street.
Well, thank you very much. Mr. Setzler.
Yes, I'm a working rep. I work hard here. I want to do things. I think doing the work's what this job's about. I show up at meetings. In fact, many of you will remember after the kind of the outrage of the 2020 election, there was maybe some reticence among some to come and have a town hall meeting about election integrity and sat right here for 3 hours, took questions. I don't run from things. I want to do the work. I want to answer the questions. I don't mind taking, as long as we're able to talk respectfully, I don't mind taking heat on things. Because I believe your representatives need to feel you. They need to be here with you. And to represent regular folks, we've got to knock on the doors. We've got to spend time with folks to be able to take the value of Cobb Candidate Capital to the introduced.
Well, being new to this, I think if you're elected to office, you need to make your face known. You need to be present at things. You need to hear from the people, and you need to answer the hard questions, like Ed said. But that's part of the responsibility. And I think it's a crime. I think one of the ladies shared that somebody in her community had no idea who the rep was. And that part of that may be their responsibility. Part of that, or a huge responsibility, is make sure the rep is always present in the community.
Thank you. My next question, we'll start with Ed. One of the things recently there is, and I know that there might be some people who are very pro this bill, but I personally was not, which was House Bill 1013, the Mental Health Parity Act. And there was a lot in that act, when it started in-house that was, disturbing to a lot of people and to me. And, it's one of those things that kind of caught us off guard for a minute. And so what I would like to know is, if you're elected for Senate District 37, will you hold town halls and actively engage constituents in legislation and alert them if there is some legislation that, may be written, in contradiction to the Republican principles and to the Republican Party?
Of course, and I think the grassroots was heard in 1013. I mean, one of the things that I appreciate, and I've said this before, thank heavens we have a bicameral legislature. I mean, there have been bills that I've worked on that are vitally important that have died in the other chamber. It makes me so mad. But I can tell you what, it's more important to stop bad ideas or to change bad ideas before they get on the governor's desk than to be able to pass things quickly. And again, there was recognition even in the process that in the other chamber there needed to be changes made in 1013 really from the outset. And I think the engagement of citizens in substantive ways made a difference in that. I mean, was there misinformation going around about 1013? Yes, but there was a lot of focused right on issues about the civil liberty issue, involuntary civil committal. That was my big issue of the bill. I was not in a place that I needed to be rallying people publicly and outrage, but behind the scenes, you better believe myself, Kate Kirkpatrick and other legislators were working to get that bill right before it got on the governor's desk, and you all made a difference in that. So whether it's me holding meetings or me going to meetings with other folks here or other holding to engage and have the dialogue, it's vital, because the common sense, the walking around sense of people in Cobb County is the values we take to state capital. And I think I'm certainly committed to that. I've approved that service.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Dowd?
Yes, when the mental health bill first came out and they hit the streets, some of the information that I heard about the bill was very alarming, but I didn't know if it was misinformation or if it was accurate. And so I think it's very important for your delegates to come and dispel the misinformation that may be surrounding the bill, so that you have accurate information, so you can assess whether or not the bill is a good bill, or if it's something that our citizens need to be alarmed about. So I do believe that we need to be a voice for the people that is always communicating to the people what good legislation is out there and what bad legislation is out there that the people need to be concerned with.
Awesome, thank you, Scott.
One thing you can count on with Scott Johnson is he listens. He listens, learns, and then we act. I have a reputation for even as a state board of education member, for holding meetings, meeting with parents, and listening to their concerns. That's why in 2021, in June 2021, our state board of education passed a resolution that spoke out against discrimination and critical race theory, because not one of your dollars should ever be spent to teach kids to hate each other and hate America. And I listen to parents. It was their concern. I will continue to listen as a senator, hold meetings, and I'll be accessible and available to the voters.
Awesome, thank you very much. Appreciate that greatly. Okay, time for next question. Drum roll, please. I think past behavior is an excellent predictor, or past history is an excellent predictor of the future. We had a question that came in again on the 2020 election. And that clearly from the questions that I've gotten is still on people's minds. The one thing I will say is one of the questions had to do with calling the legislature into session, that people weren't necessarily looking to overturn the election or anything, but to have the legislature called into session to conduct an investigation. I'm looking forward, and we here at the GOP are working very hard on making sure we have poll watchers and doing everything that we can to protect our elections. And one of those things is considering the fact that in Colorado and Michigan, the Dominion software has been leaked. There has also been misappropriation of the software from Coffee County, Georgia. So there is a petition that exists to vote by emergency balloting procedures for the primary and the general. And those procedures already exist. They're 10% of our precincts already have to have paper ballots for voting. So my question is, would you support voting by paper ballot using the scanning equipment that's in place to ensure that we can also conduct audits of the election? So we'll go with you first, Mr. Dodd.
Okay, well, I've already signed on to that with the GOP, and so I would make myself available to learn as much about secure elections as possible from the GOP, since I would be the new person on the block. But I think we need to ensure the American people out there. I was at an event a few days ago, somebody running for office, and a lady raised her hand and she said, "Does our vote really count?" And that is a bad mindset to have. But we've created that. We created that mindset, and some people think their votes don't count. So as legislators, all of us need to ensure that we do everything possible to make sure that we get 100% vote from the community. And just because we have a bad experience 2 years ago doesn't mean that we need to not go out and vote. That doesn't win elections. So we need to ensure that we encourage as much voting as possible.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson?
So there's much to be outraged about in the 2020 election. And we ought to be sure that everybody that's registered and legal gets to vote if they so choose, and everybody just gets to vote once. But I know my friend Sue Everhart here and I were, when you were state party chairman and I was Cobb County chairman, we were fighting for election integrity before it was cool, okay? But even then, we knew that that the potential issues existed, and while we have much to be concerned about the 2020 election, many of those things have been addressed. For paper ballots, I want to know the validity of the verification. You know, that's exactly how elections used to be stolen. You're right, paper ballots. Some of you remember it was by golly, a deputy would find a box of ballots in the trunk of his car, and it would overturn an election. We can't. When we go to paper ballots, we got to make sure that those ballots are secure and they provide a fair and free and honest election. Thank you.
And let me be clear, paper ballots goes along with audits. So you would have to do audits to do exactly what you said, Scott, to be sure that only those ballots count that should be. So hand-marked paper ballots along with auditing. Mr. Sessler.
I can tell you the radical left and the Democratic Party wants nothing more than elections that only hand-marked paper ballots. They're fighting for it for all they can possibly make happen. The most secure way to have elections is a combination of secure technology and paper. In fact, what we have in place is, again, I spent 2 hours in my office trying to talk an executive branch person into considering different technology. But a technology system that is secure, I'm not going to mention the name of the company, but technology that's secure to vote on that produces a physical paper ballot that's being marked by a computer, the ballot marking device, the intersection of both of those together is the most secure way to do things. Because you can't hand mark a ballot that's been marked by a secure piece of equipment. The intersection of technology and paper is the safest way to vote. Democrats want hand-marked paper ballots because they've been cheating for decades, stuffing ballot boxes. You think about the mules moving to people's homes or central locations to drop boxes. Those are hand-marked paper ballots. You think about people voting for others with improper ID, hand-marked paper ballots. We have to have some hand-marked paper ballots for overseas military. But if we eliminate no excuse absentee voting, that is a very small population of people, folks voting in person with secure technology that produces a paper ballot the most secure way for them.
Thank you. Okay, next question. China. China. What legislation are you considering to prevent the CCP from integrating into our state? And Scott, I'll leave here first.
So, question again.
The question again is, what legislation are you considering to prevent the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, from integrating into our state?
Action was taken this year and should continue that prohibits the state of Georgia from doing business with the Communist China's Chinese Party, and prevent the state of Georgia from doing business with companies that do their business with the Chinese Communist Party. We don't need to support by our dollars or by our actions the Communist Chinese Party, and we ought to make every effort to ensure that Georgians' tax dollars and the tax dollars and Georgia's tax dollars that are spent with companies aren't propping up the Communist Chinese Party.
Thank you. Mr. Sensler?
I think folks need to understand the nature of the battle that we're facing right now. The nature of the battle we're facing right now, why is the ground moving under our feet as a nation? Why is the corporations, which used to be sort of center-right, are now so radical left? It's the institutional investors. It's the biggest investors in our marketplace that control these Fortune 500 companies, the publicly traded businesses. The big investors that hold major stock in their companies, or that buy their bonds, are institutional investors such as the Teachers Retirement System of California and New York and Illinois that have hundreds of billions of dollars of assets. And they have these corporate responsibility statements that mandate certain DE&I and all the woke agendas being pushed by these institutional investors. People have no idea. That's why the ground's moving under our feet. And also by the Chinese Communist Party. The Chinese Communist Party, their investment, their international investment, is pushing these same, quote, corporate responsibility mandates to businesses that's making center-right business people stand in line with their agenda. Most folks have no idea what's happening in the background. We need to be able to go head-to-head. Many of these businesses are even headquartered in Georgia. They're having these kind of pressures put on them. Understanding the nature of that issue is thing one. Thing two is being able to engage our business community, which works against things like safe girls sports, which are starting to work against things like protecting religious freedoms. Because in the background, you've got the Chinese Communist Party pushing the woke agenda to rip America apart, pushing this racially divisive language to rip America apart, to weaken us domestically so we can't engage internationally. We need to see this happening to businesses in our own community and engage them with this knowledge that it's not Georgia businesses that are talking to us, it's the CCP and California institutional investors that are undermining our state.
Mr. Dell?
Yeah, well, I think one of the first things we gotta do to keep China from integrating themselves into our country is fire some government officials that allow it to happen. I think when you look at the interactions of the Biden administration with China, I think when you look at the investments that they have made, buying our farmland and paying farmers not to grow crops, I think the disturbing reports that have recently come out, the destruction of some of our food distribution centers, leads one to believe that somebody out there doesn't like America and wants us to have a food shortage. And somebody at the top's been hinting that there's a food shortage coming. And I wonder where he's getting his marching orders from. So we definitely need to limit the financial investment that China is making in our country, because it's not leading anywhere any good. It may make some certain individuals rich, but it definitely is not for the betterment of anybody sitting in this room. So we need to limit their involvement in our economy.
Thank you very much. Okay, now we're going to switch up. There's two questions that I got related to ESG, LMNOP, QRS. With the big banks and investment companies being in control of distribution of capital and ESG scores beginning to be used to control the values of our state and communities, what will you do to rein in the use of ESG in Georgia? Now, the second The second submission was, what do you plan to do regarding ESG? Do you understand it? How will you address it? And I believe is it Ed first?
Yeah, I'm not gonna claim expertise. I'm gonna have to study that. There's things that we know, things we have experience in, we try to lean on those things. I'm gonna have to learn more about it and understand how to do it.
Okay, so let me just clarify, ESG, that's the social scoring
Correct.
that's being used.
The understanding the extent of it, where it's really being leveraged against people, I don't have a full understanding of it. I think you have to understand the nature of the fight to be able to come up with, we can do things that are symbolic. It's tempting to do that sometimes. Other states do a lot of symbolic things that don't really have impact in law. I think, I'm not in a place that I feel like I can bring a legislative response that can really address the issue in a meaningful way yet. So I'm going to have to study more.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Dowd.
All right. So one of the first things that I learned, I came here to learn political involvement 101 from you guys. And the gentleman stood up there that night and said, if you don't know the answer, then don't fake it. So I don't know the answer to that. I'm not very, in fact, ESG, this is the first I've heard that. So I'm not going to try to fake all you guys out there on an answer because I would look like a fool and I don't want to look like a fool. So anyway, I'm going to pass off to see if Scott can do any better.
I'm not going to profess a great knowledge of ESG scores either, but I do understand the concept of social scores. It is a communist concept. And in China, if you like China, they have a social score. And if you support the party in charge, if you support the right folks, then you have a high social score. And if you don't, and you don't do the right things, you don't say the right things, you don't vote the right way, and you don't support the right folks, then you suffer. And that is not an American value, and nor should it ever be tolerated or scored in our nation.
All right, you got that. Okay, so the little angel whispered in my ear, not any more questions, but I do have one more question. That is a yes or no question. It's very quick, and I think there's some people in the room that really want to know the answer to this. I, however, as the county party chairwoman, am neutral, so I have no opinion. I want to make that clear. I'm going to do that. I never wanted a tattoo, and probably never get one, but if I did, that's what it would say. I'm the county party chairwoman. I am neutral in this topic. Let's go down the line. Do you support Moss Mountain cityhood? Yes or no?
Is that all? Is that mean it's going to be yes or no?
Yes or no?
Explanation? Yes.
Yes.
Okay, there we go. All right, so we're at the closing statements. You get 1 minute per candidate. Closing question is this: if elected, will you commit to do what you said you would do?
You want me to start? Is it 1 minute? Is this our closing statement?
This is the closing statement.
All right. Well, let me tell you, I will commit to doing what I said I would do, and that's to make this county the best possible county for you guys, to serve you, to hear your voice, to be a part of your lives in a meaningful way. I want to say this, there's no two finer candidates that I would rather run against than these two gentlemen right here. They have been gentlemen, they've been scholars to the freshmen on the block, and I appreciate that from both of you guys. Whoever wins, you're in good hands. And so I support the candidacy of the people, and if that's me, then I will do all that I can to make life good for you guys.
Thank you very much.
Well, you don't want to fail this question and say you're not going to do the things you say you'll do, so of course. But, you know, we got to focus on keeping Georgia red, on not letting Stacey Abrams become governor, on not letting Joe Biden get elected. re-elected in 2024. If he makes it to 2024, which is, you probably have some doubt like I do. But you know what we've got to do is band together. This party has to unite. We've got to come together. We've got to support Republicans. And as they said, no matter who comes out of this primary, we've got to come together, support one another, and make sure that we keep Georgia the best place to live. And we can do that by electing Republicans, and from the governor's mansion to every office within the local party in the state.
Thank you, Scott. Ed?
If elected, I aspire to do three things. I aspire to take my record of believing and fighting for the right things and continue. And there's kind of three orthos. You have to believe the right things, orthodoxy. You have to practice the right things. You have to do things smartly in the right way that can win for a value, ortho practice. The last thing I tell people is just do the right spirit, ortho ethos. What's the right spirit about how we do things? I commit to continue to fight to believe in the things that I've been fighting for my entire time in service. I promise you, I will continue to fight for things wisely, smartly, intensely, in a way that's listening to the common walking around sense of regular folks. That's the values I've been serving for and will continue to serve for. And in doing it, humbly, I hope I can do it with the right spirit. Because when we do things with the right spirit, we bring people on board. We bring people with us. Even those that may be opposed to us, they sense the spirit about what we do, and they see the truth of what we believe. I think we as Republicans have to lead, not just in believing the right things, not just in doing the right things, but by doing that with the right spirit, we grow our party, and we let folks who might start with a political dialogue different than ours recognize, these folks believe what I believe. I like where they're going. You know what? I trust them enough to follow them. That's the spirit with which I hope to lead. I've endeavored to lead my entire time in service, and I'd love to do that in the state Senate.
Thank you very much. Let's give these guys all a round of applause. Thank them for coming. Thank you. And I would like to recognize Mr. J.K. Murphy again for the Marietta Daily Journal. If you guys want to keep up on these races and what's happening, please do your subscription to the Marietta Daily Journal. Ms. Sue Everhart, we love you, we appreciate you, we thank you for you participating today. Thank you for leading the way for so many of us. And if you have your straw polls, you paid for them, so we want to see them. So you can hand them to Debbie here up front, or we have Lily, I believe, up at the front desk. So be sure and turn in your straw poll, and we will announce the results next year. We'll announce the results here shortly. Thank you for coming.